Yes, Chelsea have agreed a deal to sell Marc Cucurella to Real Madrid.
Real Madrid signed him for €55 million. Then he won the World Cup before playing a single game. On June 14th, Real Madrid agreed a deal worth up to €60 million for a 27-year-old left-back. Nobody at the club knew at that moment that they had just signed a World Cup winner. Not because anyone could see the future, because the World Cup hadn't happened yet. Don't believe me? Look at the timeline. Real Madrid announced the signing of Marc Cucurella on the exact same day Spain kicked off their World Cup campaign against Cabo Verde. The ink was barely dry on a 6-year contract running until 2032, and the player at the center of it was already boarding a flight to play a tournament that would end 5 weeks later, with him lifting the World Cup as a champion. Real Madrid didn't sign a solid squad option that summer. They signed a world champion, they just didn't know it yet. To understand why that's such a strange twist of fate, you have to go back to where Cucurella actually started, because this is not the story of a player who arrived preloaded with reputation. This is the story of a player Chelsea fans were openly calling a flop. Cucurella came through Barcelona's own academy as a boy, before La Liga side Getafe picked him up and gave him the platform to actually play first-team football. From there, Brighton signed him, and it was at Brighton, under Graham Potter, that Cucurella first looked like a genuinely special fullback, quick, aggressive, technically composed on the ball in a way most defenders his age simply weren't. That performance level is exactly what convinced Chelsea to pay a reported £63 million to sign him in the summer of 2022, a fee that immediately made him one of the most expensive defenders in the world. And then it went wrong. Fast. In his first season at Stamford Bridge, Cucurella managed just 2 assists in 33 appearances across all competitions. For a fee that size, that is not a rough patch. That is a crisis. English pundits and Chelsea's own fanbase started using the word flop within a single season, and reports at the time suggested the club was already exploring ways to move him on to balance the books. This was a player being written off before he'd even had 2 full years to find his level. But here's what nobody tells you about early struggles at big clubs. Sometimes the player doesn't leave, sometimes he simply outlasts the criticism. Cucurella stayed, and slowly, the performances caught up to the price tag. By 2025, he was no longer the punchline. He was part of a Chelsea side that won the UEFA Conference League and the Club World Cup that same year, silverware that quieted a lot of the noise that had followed him since that difficult debut season. He had gone from written-off signing to a player genuinely delivering trophies at Stamford Bridge. And then, just as things looked settled, everything cracked again. Chelsea finished the following Premier League season in 10th place, missing out on European football entirely. Cucurella didn't stay quiet about it either. He publicly criticized the club's decision to sack manager Enzo Maresca in January, a level of honesty that doesn't usually endear a player to a boardroom. Reports at the time made clear he was open to leaving, and with the club missing Champions League football for a second consecutive campaign, the appetite to move became mutual. That's when Real Madrid stepped in. And this is where the story stops being a normal transfer and starts being something with real edge to it. Because Real Madrid weren't the only serious suitor. Manchester City wanted him. So did Barcelona. The club that raised him as a boy. The club whose academy shaped the player, Chelsea eventually paid £63 million for in the first place. There's context worth understanding about why Real Madrid moved so decisively too. Club president Florentino Perez had just been re-elected weeks earlier, arriving off the back of 2 trophyless seasons, a genuinely uncomfortable stretch by the club's own historic standards. Jose Mourinho had just been appointed as the new head coach, and Cucurella was reportedly one of his first and most personal requests. Not a name pulled from a scouting report. A player Mourinho specifically wanted in his dressing room and pushed the club to go and get before anyone else could. Cucurella chose Real Madrid instead. In Catalonia, that decision did not land as a normal transfer story. It landed as a betrayal. Spanish outlets reported that Cucurella's wife received death threats in the aftermath, and the deal was described locally as a genuine act of treachery. A boy raised in Barcelona's own academy, walking straight into the arms of their fiercest historical rival. Mourinho got the player he'd personally pushed for, over 2 of European football's biggest institutions. So Cucurella arrived at the biggest club in the world, carrying 2 very different stories at once. To Chelsea supporters, a player who'd been unfairly written off and had finally proven his doubters wrong. To Barcelona supporters, a symbol of disloyalty that cut deeper than a normal move across borders ever could. And then he went to the World Cup, and none of that mattered anymore. Because here's the detail that turns this from an interesting transfer saga into something genuinely remarkable. Cucurella became the only Real Madrid player selected in Luis de la Fuente's entire Spain squad, not one of several, the only one. Every other position on that World Cup winning roster belonged to a player from a different club. When Spain lifted the trophy in New York, beating Argentina 1-0 after extra time, the only person in that entire celebration wearing a Real Madrid badge, even unofficially, even before he'd kicked a competitive ball for them, was Marc Cucurella. Think about what that actually means for Mourinho. Most managers spend a summer transfer window hoping a new signing settles in quickly, finds fitness, adapts to a new dressing room, and hopefully starts contributing by October or November. Mourinho didn't get a player who needed time to prove himself. He got a player who spent the entire summer proving himself on the biggest stage football has, against the best opposition on the planet, in matches that mattered more than almost anything a league season can offer. By the time Cucurella actually walks into the Santiago Bernabeu for his first day of pre-season, he won't be the new guy trying to find his feet. He'll be a world champion who happens to also be new. That's the part of the story that got buried under transfer fee headlines back in June. Everyone wrote about the 55 million euros, the 6-year deal, the Catalan backlash, the Chelsea criticism. Nobody was writing at the time about what Cucurella was actually about to go do in North America, because nobody could have known. The World Cup hadn't been played yet. The story wasn't finished, it just looked finished, because the transfer paperwork was signed and the headlines had already moved on. And that's really the lesson sitting underneath all of this. A transfer fee tells you what a club is willing to pay for a player based on what they've already done. It never tells you what that player is about to do next. Real Madrid paid 55 million euros in June for a good left-back with a complicated recent history at Chelsea. By the time he actually shows up to training, they'll have gotten a World Cup winner for the same price. And the only reason it feels like a coincidence is that the two events happen to overlap on the calendar, instead of being separated by a normal transfer window. Chelsea sold him in the same summer he became a champion. Barcelona lost him twice, once as an academy graduate who left for bigger opportunities, and once as a grown man who chose their biggest rival over a homecoming. And Real Madrid, almost by accident, ended up with the best value signing of their entire summer, a full 6 weeks before anyone could have actually proven it on the pitch. Picture the actual moment Cucurella walks into the Bernabeu for his first day back at work. He won't need a settling in period, the kind every new signing is usually granted, while the club patiently waits for match sharpness and chemistry to click. He arrives with a World Cup medal in his luggage, having just played every kind of pressure a footballer can face: a scoreless opener against a debutant nation, a knockout run against increasingly serious opposition, a final against Lionel Messi's Argentina that went to extra time before it broke. There is no version of pre-season anxiety that compares to what he's already been through this summer. Sometimes the biggest story in a transfer isn't the fee. It's what happens after everyone stops paying attention to the player they just bought.